Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson within the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 167, To Learn the Transport by the Pain. In an earlier form of this poem, in a letter written to Sue, it was through the pain, which is kind of fascinating. Now this is, as we said, poem 167. Our assumptions here are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our introductory set of comments as well as the preceding 166 poems. I Met a King, 166, we just finished with. Now, in some ways, we're back to what we've called the yoked opposites or the paradoxes of Emily's poetry. Back to poem 67, Success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed to comprehend a nectar requires sorest need, as well as poem 165. Here we have Emily as educator in her quest for learning, as we've said so much already about this. To learn the values of suffering and pain is, of course, the theodicy enterprise. And we're also in this poem back to Plato's Republic 7. You guys remember, we've given full lectures on this at learnstrong.net, that you have individuals sitting in the darkness of the cave looking at shadows on a wall thinking they're real. And then some kind of teacher, emancipator comes in, drags the individual, usually a young person, out at the light of the sun to quote-unquote learn that in fact what was seen in the cave was actually not the truth. Let's enjoy the poem. To learn the transport by the pain, as blind men learn the sun. To die of thirst, suspecting that brooks in meadows run. To stay the homesick feet upon a foreign shore, haunted by native lands, the wild and blue beloved air. This is the sovereign anguish. This is the signal woe. These are the patient laureates whose voices trained below ascend in ceaseless carol, inaudible indeed, to us, the duller scholars of the mysterious bard. Now, I find this a fascinating poem with this construction of two, and then finally this. Notice, to learn the transport. We go from learning to scholars by the end of this poem, yes? To learn, and we're gonna be interested in this use of this phrasing, to learn, when we hit poem 1258. When we get to poem 1258, it's gonna be like this. Halfway through the poem, we start to learn that we believe, but once entirely belief, it does not fit so well when altered frequently. We blush that heaven, if we achieve event ineffable, we shall have shunned until ashamed to own the miracle. I think for Emily, this idea of transporting is interesting as well. In poem 148, you'll remember it was transporting anguish. And I'm interested that in an earlier iteration of this line, it wasn't by the pain, but through the pain. We have said that Emily's theodicy, the last of our big five from our introductory set of comments, the question of pain and suffering is no longer asked, why is this happening to me, but rather, why is this happening for me? I think this is the point here. To learn the transport by the pain as blind men learned the sun, and of course we're back to Plato's Republic 7 with the sun. To die of thirst takes us, of course, back to poem 67, Success is counted sweetest, to comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. To die of thirst, suspecting, we'll see this word in 1657, poem 1657, that brooks in meadows run. In other words, the challenge in learning is to somehow move beyond the pain and the suffering, the loss, and then she'll say it as a third one here, to stay the homesick feet. Go back to poem 166, remember the barefoot estate, barefoot used twice here, upon a foreign shore, haunted, I think is the key word of this poem, by native lands, the wild and blue beloved air. In other words, there's some things that have changed, fundamentally have changed, and she says, I got to come to terms with that. This is the sovereign anguish. Back to poem 165, remember, mirth is the male of anguish. This is the sovereign anguish. This, notice the repetition, the signal woe. In 24 poems, she likes this use of this woe, and takes us back, of course, to poem 126. Of course, when we see this word woe, and especially Emily's readers saw this word woe, would immediately think, of course, of Milton's Paradise Lost, of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose taste brought death into the world and all our woe, right? That is to say, the theodicy question. Why must there be woe? Why must there be suffering? These are the patient key word, right? Notice from haunted to patient. Patient laureates, whose voices trained below, that is to say, in this world, right? This world is full of pain, yes? Ascend, after death, in ceaseless carol. We're back, of course, to Emily's love of music. Inaudible indeed, until, of course, post-death. To us, the duller scholars, and you'll remember scholars from poem 101, of the mysterious bard. Mysterious will have been used in poem 117. We're going to meet it again in 423. And her use of the word bard will come back in poems 1389 and 1466. And the minute we think of bard, we obviously think of Shakespeare, no question about that. She calls herself as part of that group of duller scholars. Why duller? Well, living inside of a cave, right? That is to say, unable to see the true sun. And I think that's the point at 2A of this poem. To be a true student or an artist requires patience, because there must be this willingness to ask, why did this happen for me, not to me? All pain, suffering is propedeutic, in other words, as we've said before. At 2B, I love this construction of the two, two. At 3A, I love the way that we can come back to Walt Whitman's Song of the Open Road, and especially those passages that we talked about when we did all of our lecturing on Whitman's Leaves of Grass at learnstrong.net, Talks with Walt, our playlist. Do you guys remember these lines from Song of Open Road 6 and 14? Here is the test of wisdom. Wisdom is not finally tested in schools. Wisdom cannot be passed from one having it to another not having it. Wisdom is of the soul, is not susceptible of proof, is its own proof, applies to all stages and objects and qualities, and is content, is the certainty of the reality and immortality of things and the excellence of things, something there is in the flow to the sight of things that provokes it out of the soul. Now I re-examine philosophies and religions. They may prove well in lecture rooms, yet not prove it all into the spacious clouds and along the landscape and flowing currents. It's amazing to me that these lines would be written by a contemporary poet of Emily's who never read him, and yet she's channeling very similar. Do you remember at the end of Song of the Open Road when he says, passage 14, along through struggles and wars, the goal that has been named cannot be countermanded. Have the past struggles succeeded? What has succeeded? Yourself, your nation, nature? Now understand me well, it's provided in the essence of things, that from any fruition of success, no matter what, shall come forth something to make a greater struggle necessary. Finally, at 3B, what was a time that you learned through the woe, through the pain, through the suffering, and you found that the soar will soar like a bird if you give it time? Thank you.